Hey guys, we're going to start. I'm Nunzio Signore, owner of RPP Baseball, and my head director of pitching, Nico Leontarakis, is with me. We're going to tag team this PowerPoint on how to throw harder. This is a series that we're doing that we're doing gratis to our clients and the community. If you haven't emailed us, please do so at Rockland Peak Performance, RPP Baseball underscore baseball on Instagram and Twitter, or RocklandPeakPerformance.com is our website. Um, we're doing a bunch. Next week, I'll be doing one on lower half mechanics. And today, we're doing one on a topic that is near and dear to everybody's heart. Something that you know, majority of our guys come in to actually do, and it's to throw harder. I'm going to share my screen. Nico, can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Great. I'm gonna start off with it, and I'm gonna say a little bit, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Nico. But the first thing I want to mention is that when people think about throwing harder and improving their velocity, they generally are get stuck here on number two, mechanics. And while mechanics are vitally important, there nothing happens in isolation. And it's one of the big messages I want to get across, and we would like to get across in this PowerPoint is that it it takes an army. It's not just going to a pitching coach. I have the greatest pitching coaches on the planet at my place, and they'll be the first people to tell you that the body cares, very little about what the coach has to say. Um, it's it's also we get guys that are incredibly strong, but then their mechanics aren't right. We have guys that are incredibly strong and their mechanics are okay, but they're not mobile and they can't really get into those positions. So it's all of the above. We have guys who have good mechanics and aren't strong enough, or they're strong enough, but they don't have enough body weight. So we're going to cover all of these things slightly in this PowerPoint, and we're going to touch on them. And I do want to treat it as a forum. So if you've got something to say and you want to ask a question, unclick your microphone and let's open it up. I'm not really into having everybody wait till the end to ask their questions. I always do this when I speak. I speak in a forum. So the first thing I'm going to talk about a little bit is I'm going to talk about mobility and why. Okay, it's it's crucial for our guys to be mobile. And when we're talking about young athletes, we're talking about athletes who are growing. Their bones are growing faster, actually, than their muscles. And what ends up happening is they get inherently tight, sometimes a lot tighter than middle aged people because their bones are growing so fast that their muscles can't keep up with it. And they're taut and they're very, very tight. And we see kids coming in and with they're not doing the correct mobility. Once they get to that big field, all of a sudden they have to throw further, and they're wearing out their passive restraints of their joints. Combining with things like low body weight, mobility and low body weight are a recipe for injury for guys, and it also is a big player in them preventing them from throwing hard. So with that, we make sure that we go through a full assessment. And what I mean by that, we're going to look at the body, upper half, shoulder, T spine, lower half, hip, ankle, and many other things. But for tonight, I tried to pick the big players that I think we see in young athletes. Once again, I'm emphasizing young athletes. This PowerPoint is more along the lines of how we get our younger 13 to 17-year-old guys throwing harder. Okay. This doesn't really pertain to our college or pro level guys. Okay. So we want to work on that shoulder. We want to work on their shoulder mobility. I can't tell you how many kids come in and we put them back and lay back into ER and they've got 95 degrees of ER, 100 degrees of ER. This is just not enough external rotation to be able to get back in a good and efficient layback position to be able to accelerate through into the acceleration phase and throw harder. And part of the thing that we do in the off season is we try to not only help control that ER, but we try to help them get more IR, which brings me to not only ER, we need good IR. IR helps us decelerate as well and pronate and throw, and actually helps us with velocity safely. Okay, so in the off season, we're trying to get back a lot of that IR that we've lost from throwing, and we're trying to give the ER a break. As far as T-spine, baseball's a rotational sport. Nothing could be more important than rotating well. Okay, our T-spine evaluation, we take it very seriously as far as seeing our guys that may have, everything in place, but they can't rotate well. If they can't rotate well to their arm side, that means when the hips go, the arm goes with it. They can't hold hip and shoulder separation. When they can't rotate to their finish side, that means they slam shut and it's early ball release. And you can't come down on the ball. We can't get more leverage on the ball. We can't create that later arm speed that helps us throw harder. As far as the lower half goes, the hips. It's really the shoulder, T-spine, the hips. I'm going to talk about the ankles a bit, but the hips, internal and external rotation. We need external rotation to help push. We need internal rotation to help stop and actually come through and help with the extension of the hip and post up of the lead leg as we land, roll into internal rotation. It helps us transfer the force from the ground up into the upper body and eventually into the arm and eventually ultimately into the ball. So if we're lacking, once again, if we're lacking that hip internal rotation, we're going to end early as we come around. And once, proprioception wise, once the brain tells the hips that we can't go any further, it tells the body to let go of the ball. Once you're done, it tells you to let go of the ball. If we've got bad hip IR, we're going to end early. It's going to make us release the ball early, high in arm side, and it's not going to let us get the leverage to come down on that ball and spin that ball and ultimately get better movement and ultimately velocity. Last thing I want to talk about is the ankle. The ankle is ground zero for force. Okay, so when we if we might be able to apply a lot of force into the ground, but as soon as we apply that force, it gives it back to us. And if our ankles are not strong and stable and mobile enough to handle that, we are going to attenuate that force up our leg, into our upper body, and into the arm and ball. Basically, if the body knows that the ankles are not handling the force that's coming back up, it's going to bring everything down and not allow enough force into the body to actually produce more velocity on the ball. And this is a copy of what we give our athletes once they do an assessment.
Why is it? I wouldn't quit.
Questions?
I'll work on that over the winter.
Clear, and that,
Hey,
is for people to judge the credibility of that response. At the end of the day, here in America, we're living in a moment of extreme political violence. And
Mr.
that's
I don't know who that is. You're gonna have to mute
every
him.
single person in public.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, guys. We good? We good, Nico?
We're good. We're watching Velocity News.
Okay, so this is a picture of a personalized mobility program that would give to our athletes once they come in for a baseline assessment. Which it tells us a lot about what they need to do. As you can see on the right, it has links that they can click on their phone, whether they want to train remotely or whether they want to train in-house. They can go right to the video with cues embedded in the video. And this is, as far as mobility goes, we do the assessment, we find their movement strategies, we find what may be holding them back from a performance standpoint as far as throwing harder, and we will give them their own personalized mobility program. So at this point, we're going to talk about mechanics. That was part 2, and I'm going to turn it over to Nico. So Nico, you got it. I think you can share your screen. You could try it.
No, I think we're all good. I think we have everything here on the slide.
Okay, good.
So, thank you guys for joining us tonight. We obviously touched on the assessment portion of things. And as Nunzio said, mechanics isn't the end all be all for velocity. There's many things that are incorporated into throwing harder. Although mechanics isn't the only thing, it is important to touch on the main things that we look for. On the next slide, you'll see what our pitching analysis looks like. But here we have here's the why. Why is it important? Because although there is no such thing as perfect mechanics, there is such thing as optimal mechanics for each individual pitcher. And that could actually be seen from a mobility assessment and from a strength assessment. And for starters, we have the arm. So that is where the arm and the shoulder, the layback, and that whip effect. It's important. Nunzio and I talk about this all the time. The pecs are the body's main, pecs and lats are the body's main internal rotators. And if we have guys that come in and they're super, super rigid and tight in set areas, it'll affect their ability to get their arm overhead to create that whip effect. And you transition that now into the trunk. The trunk also, you can see we do in the mobility assessment would be the T-spine. This bridges the upper half, which is the arm and the shoulder, and the lower half together. You need a sense of rigidness and stability in the trunk, but you also want it to be fluid and rotate effectively in order for it to violently deliver the arm. And with the lower half, we have the hips that could be broken up really into 2 pieces. You could go first, the ankles, as Nunzio said, the ankles is ground zero. For us, that is the support system that holds everything together from the ground up. If you have loose and unstable ankles, it'll be very hard for you to drift effectively, to be able to get into your glute effectively, and to be stable at front foot strike. And as well as the hips and the pelvis is staying neutral for as long as possible in order, once front foot plant happens, it snaps, and then it allows the trunk to follow and the arm and shoulder to follow, which would be effective kinematic sequencing. So transitioning this now into the next slide, this is what an example of a mechanical analysis would look like. This would be for our older college guys, or older high school guys, 16 and older, college, and even our pro guys. This would be a sample of what we would look for. And for our younger guys, 15 and younger, we have a simpler form, which is about 14, 15 disconnects that we categorize in different areas of the body. And here's would be an example of our older one where we've broken up into the 3 big segments here: arm and shoulder, trunk and lower half, arm, shoulder, trunk, and then lower half. And you guys could see here where we have the green would be passing, yellow would be somewhat acceptable and needs work, and red would be a little bit more of an aggressive fail. That's something that we need to kind of clean up a little bit more urgently.
Nico, are you going to talk at all about some typical things that we see in the arm and shoulder, like 1 or 2 things that you see common with young kids, and maybe 1 or 2 things in the trunk and 1 or 2 in the lower half? Could you do that for a minute?
100%. From the arm and shoulder perspective, big things that we see: forearm fly out and pushing with the elbow. A lot of kids were taught, get the ball out in front, get the ball out in front. And what ends up happening is these guys are actually spending a little bit too much time holding on to the ball. And when you turn sliders, in order to create that effect, these guys are actually holding on, leading with the elbow, and you're going to start to create a little bit too much tension and pressure on the forearm, on the bicep, and on the shoulder. And forearm flyout would be ineffective unraveling of the arm.
Forearm flyout is one that I see a lot. Forearm flyout is huge with kids.
100%. From a trunk movement standpoint, the 2 big ones that I see is a lack of trunk stack at front foot strike. And a lot of that actually just has to do with a lack of strength present. These guys don't have the core stability to remain stable at front foot plant. So these guys will land and you'll see them with the ribs flared, and you'll see the letters on their jersey almost facing the ceiling. as opposed to facing in front of them where they're kind of maintaining their core being braced, and a lack of hip shoulder separation. This is something that Nunzio and I talk about all the time. We call them total body movers, which is guys who don't know how to deliver the lower half first from the upper half. And where you'll see total body movers really get created actually stems from the lower half. Would be number one is pelvic glute engagement. These guys don't know how to engage their lower half. And if they do, their mindset on being explosive with the lower half would be jumping off the mound and pushing off that back leg, which in turn creates excess back leg extension, where you see guys throwing on one foot. We're producing a lot of force with the back leg going on a front foot strike. It'd be the equivalent of now throwing on one foot, of trying to shoot a rubber band, pulling it all the way far back, and then just moving it forward and then letting it go, versus being able to pull the rubber band all the way back and letting it go where there's the most amount of tension.
I see a lot of that is comes from that pushing, that jumping. We call it vaulting. That is another huge one that we see young kids doing all the time. And I attribute that to two things. One is a really weak lower half. They can't hold a hinge as they're coming down the mound. And the other thing is a lack of drifting. Young kids, I try to tell kids, as your front leg comes up, you should start drifting towards the plate. So what happens is you can start creating your linear move without giving up any rotation at all yet. Right? So what happens is as that leg comes up and you start to drift, when you do start to load your hip and drop, okay, you're actually still moving forward. And we're getting closer and closer to foot plant without having to rotate yet. When they just get up there, what a lot of kids do is they get up and then they just drop. And they just drop straight down. And now they got to move all this way from a hinge position. And we know that our young guys, a lot of them aren't strong enough yet to actually go from this position and start moving forward. And then they're in a hurry to get out of that leg and they jump. And they bring their velocity, they bring their force production more vertical instead of linear towards the plate. So that is that's a big one, Nico, that I see all the time.
Great. So next, that was the front half of what the mechanical analysis will look like. Now, once this is completed, we provide plyo drills, correct mechanical deficiencies, optimize sequencing, and promoting athletic and powerful positions. As you guys can see on this sheet on the right, based on what we find in the pitching analysis, we will break this down, the top three biggest disconnects by each segment, which is arm and shoulder, trunk movement, and lower half. They'll be listed here along with the definition. So it's not just educational for me and my fellow pitcher coaches, also for the athlete and the parent of the athlete that wants to know exactly what is going wrong and why it is going wrong. And paired with these plyo drills that we'll be giving these kids and all of our athletes from high school to pro is DNS drills, which is dynamic neuromuscular stabilization drills. We started implementing this last year, and it was a huge, huge help using water bags, water balls, different hurdles, and smaller boxes. Improved upon was mind-muscle connection and optimizing sequencing without having time to think about it. These kids, from a young age, you see it where they don't really have the greatest grasp of what mechanics look and might feel like. So promoting athletic positions to teach them how to self-organize better becomes crucial in their long-term athletic development.
Awesome. That's a big one. The water bag drills have really, what they do is they create an unstable environment for the kids, and it makes them have to adapt and actually become a lot more athletic. You're next. You're up.
So progressive throwing program. Understanding the timeline, on-ramping phase, velo phase, pitch design is for a separate time. These three things here are extremely important because from my standpoint, reverse engineering is everything. I need to understand when these kids need to be ready. And this is a sample of what you guys are going to see here in the next preceding slides of what this winter is going to look like for our youth athletes this year. So beginning with understanding the timeline, this is what it would look like for us. We have our winter pitching lab is a 12-week, 3-month program where our big components, the on-ramp, the velo phase, and the pitch design / development, which we also incorporate live ABs. Important thing to note, if an athlete joins us late in a 12-week track and one of those months has to get nixed, velo phase also has to go with it, because we can't rush a velo phase because we're going to be putting a kid in a position where he could get hurt. And that's the last thing that we want to do. So big things that we need to know: how does your arm and body feel? How many innings did you throw this year? Are you currently throwing? Are you shut down? And I don't want to say the most important one, but for myself, from a scheduling and programming standpoint, when do you need to be ready by? Everybody needs to be ready for a spring season, summer ball, and or you'll have times where kids have showcases and workouts or college visits with schools where you need to make sure that the throwing program is mapped out to complement when it is that they need to be ready.
And I think it's really important also what you said was, if a guy shows up late, okay, we cannot put you in a velo phase if you are not ramped up. And when we're dealing with a large number of kids and young athletes, we can't have guys jumping through different phases at different times when everybody has to be ready at the same time. So
Right.
if you're going to miss, if you're going to come in, and the reason I say this is because it happens every year, and we have the kid who's coming in and he walks in January, January 10th or, January 21st, and he wants to join the pitching lab. And we explain to them, listen, we actually would have to start on-ramping you. Our guys are already starting to get into a velo phase. We can't just run a kid and let him start where everybody else started. And anybody who's going to take your money and do that is selling you snake oil and is actually exposing your kid to the probability of really sustaining a bad injury, which none of us want to do. Hey, Nico, can you explain why what is involved in the mound blending and the pitch design development?
Yes. So we on-ramp and velo phase, those are their own separate slides. The mound blend is now teaching these kids, improving upon the mechanical deficiencies that we found in the pitching analysis at a sub-max intensity, now incorporating this onto the mound. From a mechanical standpoint, there's one thing to throw lightly or aggressively on a flat ground with or without momentum, but there's another thing now to understand when the front foot is supposed to hit on a slope, because the mound with drifting properly is going to provide you more momentum than you just drifting on a flat ground because you're going on a downhill surface. So teaching you how to organize on a slope and preparing your arsenal, fastballs, breaking balls, changeups, etc., in order for them to be competition ready at the end of the pitching lab and for the spring season.
Great.
So first phase, would be on-ramping phase. This is what the first 4 weeks will look like. This takes us beginning of January. It's about the beginning of December to beginning of January, excuse me. Like I had mentioned in the previous slide, we'll be working at sub-max intensities. We'll be using the DNS and the plyo drill pairings along with athletic throws. It's extremely important that these kids know, and I say this to them a lot, and it might be a little dull at times, but throwing light is productive because it gives us an opportunity to correct things that are going wrong earlier. And if we allow them to persist at a higher intensity, it'll continue to create a downhill effect of mechanical deficiencies versus attacking them on the front end on a lighter side and promoting athleticism, promoting fluidity in the arm, and really taking the strikes out of it, taking the velocity component out of it, just teaching these kids what true feel is like from the mind and from the body.
It's very much like a tissue prep phase in the weight room. We start the
Right.
very first month of training. Our lifting is light. because we want to get them into good positions and we want to make sure their positions are good before we actually add that load.
Next is the velocity phase, which is pretty much why every single person is on this PowerPoint and why everybody wants to join the pitching lab to work with us, is to gain velocity. And this is where we incorporate long toss indoors. We provide them throwing drills and different constraints for them to be able to air their arm out. Now, compression throws and pull downs. We have these guys now start to throw at higher intensities with the improved mechanics that we worked on in the on-ramping phase to see what it's like for them. And as the quote shows, when it's time to throw hard, punch the gas. And we incorporate this by using compression throws.
Hey, Nico, you're cutting out. Okay, good. Sorry. Go over
No.
compression. Go over compression.
So the compression throws, will use these guys when they come in from long toss. We will have these guys throw a little bit harder on a line on a shuffle, just for them to build momentum from a little bit more of a stagnant position versus when it's time for them to pull down, get a little bit more footwork involved, allow the arm a little bit more time to climb. And we use overload and underload balls. We use a 6 ounce and a 4 ounce. And that's with our, very important to note, our older high school kids that are strong enough for it. We're not going to give a 13-year-old kid randomly a 6 and a 4 ounce ball and tell them to throw it as hard as they can, because it's actually going to just serve them no purpose. And the biggest thing from the mound velocity standpoint, there's other facilities that have guys throw it with plyo balls. Biggest thing that we found here was using them with leather balls over plyo balls, because with the leather ball, there is no rubber. From when you squeeze the plyo ball, you start to incorporate more of the forearm, and you start to add external pressure on the side of the ball, and it'll actually cause these kids to supinate at a super high intensity versus giving them the baseball and a 6 ounce and a 4 ounce leather ball. So we could achieve the same goal that we want, which is to throw hard on the mound and overload, underload, using strength and then using speed to our advantage with the guys that we deem to be strong enough in order to create the velocity gains that we are looking for.
I remember that Nico last year came up to me and said, or 2 years ago, he said, on the Mount Velo days, I think we should go to leather balls. The guys grip the plyos so tight when it comes time to throw hard. And I actually had a conversation with a coach 2 weeks ago at our other PowerPoint on pitch design, and he was asking that question, which was a really great question. And I had mentioned to him that we had switched over to using leather balls instead of plyos because kids started complaining about forearm tightness.
Agreed. And to sum this all up, if it's athletic, velo and command are present and there's no pain, leave it alone. This pertains mostly to our older guys, college mainly, and our pro arms that we have here at the facility. From the younger guy standpoint, there's going to be room to get stronger. There's going to be room to get more explosive. And from the younger guys, I just had a pitching lesson with a kid that's 16, that's 6'8", who has a lot of room to fill in, who hits growth spurts year in and year out. He has to constantly reteach himself his mechanics because he has a lot of moving parts with this. So very important. I was told from the big league pitching coach from the Arizona Diamondbacks, Brian Kaplan, don't teach the unique out of somebody. If it's different and it works and there's no pain and it's repeatable and they're throwing hard, leave it be. I'm going to transition this now over for Nunzio, where he's going to talk about the strength training portion of all this.
That was really the crux of what we're talking about, what Nico was talking about. I'm going to really briefly go through some strength training and as it pertains to velocity, because I'm going to tell you that this is one of the biggest things that I see. And the bottom line is you need to be strong to throw hard and to continue to throw hard. There's a lot of kids. If someone's got their mic on, could they please shut it off? The bottom line is you need to be strong. You don't necessarily need to be an ox to throw hard, but if you're not strong, there is a huge, huge possibility that you're not going to be throwing hard for very long. And the things that I'm going to talk about, obviously, are our lower half, our upper half core control, and our shoulders. So with that, we're going to talk about increasing lower body strength. A pitcher will be much more aware of using his lower body if he becomes more aware that he actually has one. The hamstrings, the glutes, these are the biggest, most powerful muscles in the body. If you're wondering how to increase pitching velocity, you have to increase your lower body strength. And it seems like to me, when every mom or dad comes in with their kid and he's young, they already understand. They're already telling us, yeah, he needs to learn how to use his legs. Okay. You know that he needs to learn how to use his legs. So are you bringing us your child so that our pitching coach can teach him to use his legs that he actually doesn't really have yet because they're not strong? He's only going to be able to hinge so well. He's only going to be able to put so much force into the ground. While we can teach him to use his legs in his mechanics, we can't fully get him to get in optimal positions with his lower half if he's not strong enough to hold those positions. This is Nick Samillo from the Pittsburgh Pirates. Don't get freaked out by the weight. This is Nick. He's in his off-season training with us from the Pirates. And this is some of the examples of our 13 to 15-year-olds will trap bar deadlift. They will obviously use much less weight, always monitored with a coach. But this really works the glutes and the hamstrings and the quads. It's really a universal exercise. It's really a full body exercise. It also works the core as well. As far as the anterior core control and rotary core control, Nico was talking about trunk stack and how kids are not able to hold that trunk stack, and they're either going into extension in their lower lumbar in the back at foot plant, or they get too heavy on their front foot and they're too forward. And this is their inability to maintain an upright position as they go through hip and shoulder separation. So we know it's a rotational sport, and the anterior core is the center of it all. I see kids all the time, and I'm going to tell you guys, 99% of every kid that walks into our gym does not have a strong core. That's 99%. If the core is so important, and I'm telling you that 99% of our kids walk in with weak cores, that's telling me that 99% of the kids that walk into our place, they need to get stronger in their core, or their velocity ceiling is only going to be so high. Okay, the ability to create that anterior core stiffness, both during layback and follow through, is essential to fix some of those things that Nico was talking about. It helps them hold hip and shoulder separation to help create that torque that they need, and also create that whipping action once the torque unfolds. So if we don't have hip and shoulder separation, we don't have any torque. And if we don't have any torque, it's not going to unwind. And when it doesn't unwind, their kid's going to have to get all that velocity from his arm. And that's where we see a lot of kids who are underweight, or a lot of kids who are weak, that can't hold hip and shoulder separation. They start to overuse their arm. They might be able to throw. They might genetically be able to throw harder because they can use their arm, but their arm is going to eventually call a timeout on that. So anterior core is the front to back. Rotary core is in the frontal plane. Okay, increasing this anti-rotational core strength will help assure that you're getting that separation from the right place, and you're not cranking at the elbow. Here's an exercise right here that we use. This is an awesome, awesome exercise. This is Josh Loshorn, also a pitcher with the Pittsburgh Pirates. We have a few Pirate guys this year and last year. It's great. But this is Josh Loshorn. Josh, what we're doing is we put him in a position right there, and he gets into hip shoulder separation. He turns the hip one way, holds that core, and then what we're doing is we're having him work his core while he's in hip and shoulder separation. Okay? And that cable runs from the bottom down, and that's trying to pull him back into extension. So he has to resist that extension while it's also trying to pull him around. He has to resist that rotation, and it makes him completely stay stacked and stiff in a position of hip and shoulder separation. Transfer of power from the lower body to the upper body. This is generally what we actually will work on at the latter part of the season. We'll get the kids strong, we'll get their core strong, and then we will work on the transfer. And this is called a dynamic cable lift. What we want him to do is we want the athlete to sit in to that rear leg, and then we want him to transfer that force from his leg up through his core and into his arm to the point of ball release up top. Okay, so this is where we start to actually make it more dynamic. This is where we start to make it much more sport specific. Once our athletes are strong enough, and that honestly with 13, 14, and 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, that doesn't, they're never going to be strong enough in their first, second year of lifting with us. They're going to continually to get stronger. We do not need to work on power development with a young athlete because they're not strong enough to actually produce enough power to work on it. You are going to increase their overall power with a kid that's young by just continually getting him stronger. So strength training with our young guys is maximum absolute strength training all the way through the off season. Whereas Nick Samillo or Josh that I showed you, these pro ball players, they already have a 500-pound deadlift. These guys are 24 years old, 23 years old. They're strong. They've been in the weight room. They are what we consider strong enough to throw a 5-ounce baseball. These guys will not lift heavy all season. Our young guys, they need to lift heavier. We do not need to do a bunch of power training, which once again, I consider a lot of smoke and mirrors when you go to a facility and say, we're going to work on his power. You're not going to work on his power. He's not strong enough to produce enough power yet. You're going to work on his power by just working on his strength. 13, 14, and 15-year-old kids need to get strong. Once they get strong, then we can actually work on them producing that strength faster. Once we increase force production by training strength, we now have to learn to apply it quickly. And by utilizing lighter jumps and rotary stuff, here's Nick now, the typical example of Nick's using something that is probably 20% of what he would lift for 3. This is very light to him. Okay, this is 135, and at a 500-pound deadlift, this is just about 20% of what he generally lifts. It's very light. It's light enough that he can jump with it safely, and it's heavy enough that it's going to actually create a stimulus for power. As far as the rotary core goes, this is Matt Gehrig. This is actually one of our pitching coaches this year. Also played with the Boulders. He is demonstrating a medicine ball shovel pass, and this is how we produce power in the core rotational wise. And we have a Proteus motion machine. I didn't bother putting the Proteus motion on the demonstration because it's really not that usable to anyone. It's a $20,000 machine that we use with our athletes, but not everyone has one. So it's kind of pointless to tell you that you should be using one. Last thing I'm going to talk about is lean muscle mass. This is a big one. Nico would agree with me. This is probably the biggest one. Not only when I say lean muscle mass, not only am I saying that kids need to gain weight, most of our young athletes need to gain weight. Some of our young athletes need to lose weight. They need to lose body fat. They might need to gain weight and lose body fat. Okay. These are 3 athletes at 210 pounds. Okay. The one at the top is 10 to 15% body fat. The one in the middle is 25 to 30. The one at the bottom is 35 to 40. Muscle weighs much more than fat. And then you can see that these look like 3 completely different weights, but they're not. Okay. They all weigh 210 pounds. What this tells me is that the athlete at the top at 10 to 15% body fat is going to be a machine. He has more muscle on his body because he's leaner and weighs the same amount, and that is going to give him a bigger engine to move less luggage. Okay, and as we get higher in percentage, it's gonna make our movement impaired because it's in the way, and it's also going to make them not as explosive because they can't move as quickly. That more lean body mass gives a pitcher the ability to create more force when moving down the mound. Gaining lean muscle mass will not only give you the strength to deal with all the new force your body's creating, but also will help improve velocity control issues as well by getting you into better positions and letting you better paint where you want the ball to go. Unfortunately, this is the biggest challenge, and the parents that are on this call, on this Zoom call presentation, can probably sympathize. I sympathize with you. A lot of your kids are hard gainers. It's a team effort. You cannot expect your kid to meal prep at 13, 14, and 15 years old. He's got school. He's a young kid. He's doing stuff. That meal prep is going to be your job. And if you want to get the adequate amount of calories into your son or daughter, you need to make sure you're meal prepping, you're sending them with the food, and give them the ability to eat it. But what I tell a lot of the young guys is, you wouldn't skip a bullpen, right? Because if you skip a bullpen, it's going to affect your pitching. Well, skipping a meal is going to affect your pitching more than skipping a bullpen. Because if you're not gaining weight, you're not going to throw hard. It is the number one marker of throwing harder, is putting on lean muscle mass, along with strength training, way before mechanics. When you look at a pyramid and you look at the bottom, it's the biggest part, it's strength. Then we get into mobility, then we get into mechanics, and then we get into pitch design. We don't even need to be worrying about pitch design until we got a kid that's throwing hard enough to actually have pitches to throw. And we can't be worrying about his mechanics if he's weak and can't get into those positions. So the object of our pitching lab is to work on these at the same time. We have a strength training program and the pitching program or hitting program. And what happens is they come in, they get their lesson in the tunnel, and then they get into the weight room and they lift. In closing, yes?
Deal.
Hi.
So, question, if I may.
Sure.
And I don't expect you to give away any kind of trade secrets at this point, but from various baseball circles, in terms of especially the off season and working out, I've heard 4 times, 6 times. So, two-part question: how often do you have kids working out? I mean, and I know there's different body parts and whatnot. So that's kind of part one. And then specific to like the stabilizers, rotator stuff, how often do you guys typically have kids doing that stuff?
Great question. So number one, our young guys, 13 to 15, they lift in groups. They don't lift on their own. They have to learn the correct movement strategies. At 15, they can go into the weight room. If they test out with good form, they can go in and lift on their own. They have to test out. We need to know that the kid's form is good and that he is mature enough in his head to handle being in the weight room and being accountable for his own program. Because if he's not, we're just letting a kid loose. He's not going to get the results. His velo will not go up. He will say that he came here and it didn't work, and we do not want that. But anyway, our groups, they can train 2 to 3 times a week. The 13 to 15-year-olds, once they go into the big weight room, that option becomes 3 to 5 times a week. We don't think that a 13 to 15-year-old kid needs to train more than 3 times a week. His body is still growing. I think it's better for him to eat, get rest, get good sleep, get home, get his schoolwork done. And actually, honestly, 3 days a week is going to do him all the world of good. As far as the mobility and the arm care and the cuff and the rotator cuff work and the strength training, the thing about training 13 to 16-year-olds is that they need it all. They're not like a pro guy who's got great speed, but he needs to get work on his mechanics. We don't have a guy he's got great mechanics, but he needs to throw harder. These guys, they need to get stronger. They need arm care. They need cuff work. They need plyometric training. They need stability work. So our programs incorporate all of that in a 2 to 3 day program. If they come 2 to 3 times a week, every program, every day they come will encompass a little bit of all of that. So they won't get all this strength training that an older guy that can handle it. They don't need it. They need 30 minutes of strength training, 15 minutes of arm care, 10 minutes of plyometric work. They're young. They need all of it. We need to develop these guys as a total athlete. They're way too young to be specializing. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, perfect. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions?
Yeah, actually, so I had a question about athletes that have the strength foundation.
Mr. Justin, what's going on?
How we doing, brother?
Yes, sir. How do you maintain strength for the athletes that have enough strength and that are working on power? Because just speaking anecdotally, like once you work power for a while, like the strength does go down after a certain point. And
Great.
how do you program in like I think you mentioned like 5x5 days
Yes.
for certain
So
exercises.
this is
Because
just
those aren't really reflected in programs, I feel like.
right. This is Justin. Justin is one of our guys. Justin, how long have you been throwing with us? 4 years?
For probably a little bit more than 4 years.
He's
Something
throwing right
like
now.
that.
He's pitching up at MIT, and it's great to hear from you. So great question. Once a kid, we deem a kid strong enough, and he's in a power phase. First of all, strength takes about 3 weeks before it starts to dissipate. Speed takes about 6 days. Okay, so that's the first thing to go. What happens after that is you've got about 2 to 3 weeks of not having to train heavy before you even start to lose max strength. What we suggest kids do is 2 days a month, every 2 weeks, give yourself a full body 5x5 day, just like you said, Justin. So what we'll do is when we're programming a kid in a power phase that's older, mind you, his question, he's in college. He's been with us. He's strong, great athlete. He is going to be in a power phase. That's why he's asking this. For the young guys, this is a non-entity. But for Justin's question, I will be doing Justin's program this week. I will give him a power phase, and I will tell him to do a full body day every 2 weeks to maintain the strength that he has. Remember, we're not trying to get him stronger. We're trying to get him more explosive at this point, but we don't want him to get weaker. If anybody has any more questions, let me know. I just want to finalize this last slide. I want to emphasize once again that as mechanics are important, you can see that I've made them the first thing up there and everything else is separate because this is what everybody thinks about when they think about velocity. They think about, I need to change my mechanics. Your mechanics will get a couple miles an hour maybe on you, but all these other things combined will get you much further than just fixing your mechanics. I'm not saying you don't need to fix your mechanics, but I think that a lot of kids who are young, they think that they're by keep continuing the throw, working mechanics. I can't tell you how many guys come in here and they just want to come in and they just want to do the throwing program. And we tell them this probably isn't the right place for you because I know that as great as my pitching coaches are, they're going to come in and if they just throw all off season and don't lift, their velo is not going to go up. It could possibly actually go down. Any thoughts on that, Nico?
I totally agree. It's unfortunate that we've seen I'm going on my 4th pitching lab now, and many a time, not going to name any names, but I've seen one too many times where a kid gains 3, 4, 5 miles an hour in an off season, no in-season training whatsoever, loses all of his velo and then some because he lost all of his strength and then all of his power. And then now he's scrambling for quick fixes as opposed to just stacking the good days on top of each other and continuously doing what was already working, which was effective and periodized strength training.
This is Matt Gehrig, one of my pitching coaches. Look at the size of this guy. He's been like that. Nico, you're my pitching coach, right? How tall are you? How much do you weigh?
6'4", 250.
The average size of a Division I college baseball player is between 6'1" and 6'4". They're not gigantic 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". They're like between 6'1" and 6'4", maybe 6'3", but they're about 3 times their height in inches in body weight and probably under 15% body fat. And while we don't expect 3 times your body weight with a 14-year-old kid, we do expect 2.3. And you can do the math on your kid. You have a kid who's 5'8", and he's 135 pounds, he's about 30 pounds under. And you need to put that weight on. And I'm not saying you need to put it on immediately, because that's not good either. But you need to get on an eating plan, and you need to get this kid some really good calories, or his arm's going to fall off. And that's just not a great thing.
Agreed.
Questions?
Another question. So this is just like an argument that I've heard from other people, I guess. So hypothetically, like, it's about strength versus power. If you just kept increasing your strength, wouldn't your power at a certain weight like increase? Like, so say like you're 2.5 times your body weight on your shot bar deadlift. If you increase that to like 3 times, then like the power numbers for a lower weight would increase as well. So what's the reasoning behind lowering weight for power?
It's called diminishing returns. What happens is once the cross-sectional area gets too big, it starts to actually interfere with contractions. It starts to make contractions slower. It starts to make you less mobile. As a matter of fact, if you want to look at a study by Dr. Brian Mann, he's the actual strength and conditioning coach at the University of Miami. What he found was with his players, when he actually had them deadlifting, I believe, when he had them deadlifting up to 2 times their body weight, their vertical jump went up. When he went to 2.5 times their body weight, their vertical jump went up. When they went to bench deadlifting 3 times their body weight, their vertical jump went down. Okay, and what happens is there becomes a time of diminishing returns. And while an offensive lineman can lift much more than 3 times his body, 2.5 times his body weight, he is not going to have the explosive athleticism that the running back's going to have at much less strength. It's really about the diminishing returns and the cross-sectional area of the muscle getting too dense. That's a really great question. But
Thanks.
yeah. Diminishing returns. Like I'm preaching strength training here. Justin is he's one of those upper level guys that already is kind of where he needs to be strength wise. So he's there's always that little bit of nervousness. I don't want to get weak. Why wouldn't I just keep getting more powerful if I get stronger? And it's all about diminishing returns.
Yeah, that's sort of the idea behind. Yeah.
Yeah. Next.
So Nunzio, so kind of with that in mind, how much does, being a quick, fast twitch fiber athlete factor into the training and with powerlifting and stuff like that? Are you always kind of considering making sure the guy stays as a quick twitch guy, even if he's kind of doing the heavy weights, or how does that factor in?
So when we wow, that's a really good question. When we assess our guys, we actually categorize them as a velocity deficient or a force deficient athlete. And the really, really twitchy guys are generally, we call them the force deficient athletes because they're really twitchy. And what you want to do is, if you have a really strong guy and you need to make him more twitchy, you need to make him more twitchy without taking away too much of what makes him great. And that's because he's strong. If you have a really fast twitch guy and he just needs to get stronger, this is exactly what Justin was just talking about. Okay, I've got a really twitchy guy. I want to make this guy even more powerful, but we have to do it by making him stronger. But we don't want to make him so strong that he starts to lose what makes him great in the first place. Okay, so our velocity guys lift one way and our force deficient guys lift another way. Our guys that need to get fast and twitchy go this way. Our guys that are fast and twitchy but need to get stronger. So the fast and twitchy guys, they can take their force and they can move with it really quickly. The problem is they can't produce a lot of it because they're not strong. Our really strong guys can produce a lot of force, but they can't do it quickly. So we need to train them fast We need to train the twitchy guys a little bit slower, but not take away. You'll still need to give them what they need to where they rely on. So it's like they have a major in what they need and a minor in what they already have.
Great, thanks.
Then
Anyone else?
You have so I guess I'm in Canada, so our off season is a lot longer than yours.
Right.
So when you guys start, do you have a shutdown phase at all?
As far as throwing,
Yeah.
we do, and Nico could talk a little bit about that.
That really is just indicative of how much they threw that year and also how their body's feeling. You know, we could either have these guys shut down for a couple of weeks, or something that we've been doing the last few years that has seemed to work for us is have an active recovery phase where these guys are throwing at maybe 3 times a week at 50, 60%, 25 throws, light, just taking the arm for a walk. So they're not having to play catch up when it's time to re-ramp back up.
All right,
And guys,
that makes sense.
and guys,
Yeah.
anybody? Oh, you have another one? You have another question?
Yeah, so just because our off season, like guys will stop playing in September, and then they're off October, November, December, all the way until April, until basically tryouts start again for club teams.
Yeah, they need to be throwing.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah,
have a guy
I just-
shut down for 3 months.
No,
for that.
I'm just saying the average time, like for you guys would be a lot shorter, the shutdown than for me.
Well, not really. A total shutdown. I would never shut down.
No,
more
not
than
a, wouldn't be a, sorry, not, wouldn't be a total shutdown. Is there, I still have, do like throw, like with throwing plyos.
They,
we're not doing
you guys
anything high
you
intense.
guys would be doing active recovery and long toss longer than we will.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Guys, our pitching lab starts in 10 days or 8 days. Really, if you're interested in if you're an athlete watching or you're a parent of an athlete watching, you really owe it to yourself to come by and check out what goes on here, or look online at rocklandpeakperformance.com. It's something that I think not many people are doing to the level that we are. And I'd like to thank Nico for being part of this this presentation. Thank you, brother.
Thank you for having me, Nuns.
And I'm going to stop my share. And that's it. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email me at nunzio@rocklandpeakperformance.com, or you can email Nico at rocklandpeakperformance.com. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Until then, have a great night. Thank you.